Topic 4.6 Effects of the Market Revolution on Society and Culture. A high and honorable feeling generally prevails, and the people begin to assume, more and more, a national character. Hezekiah Niles, Niles Weekly Register, 1815. Learning objective. Explain how and why innovation in technology, agriculture, and commerce affected various segments of American society over time. The wide impact of the market revolution that resulted from the innovations in technology, agriculture, and commerce affected all groups of people in the growing nation. They resulted in the development of a distinctively American culture, an increase in religious fervor, and support for various reforms movements. Specialization on the farm, the growth of cities, industrialization, and the development of a modern capitalism meant the end of self-sufficient households and the growing interdependence among people. These changes combined to bring about a revolution in the marketplace. Farmers provided food to feed workers in cities, who in turn provided an array of mass-produced goods to farm families. For most Americans, the standard of living increased. At the same time, however, adapting to an impersonal, fast-changing economy presented challenges and problems. Women. As American society became more urban and industrialized, the nature of work and family life changed for women, many of whom no longer worked next to their husbands on family farms. Women seek employment in a city were usually limited to two choices: domestic service or teaching. Factory jobs, as in Lowell's system, were not common. The overwhelming majority of working women were single. If they married, they left their jobs and took up duties in the home. In both urban and rural settings, women were gaining relatively more control over their lives. As more men worked away from home, women took on new responsibilities as moral leaders within the home, a development known as the cult of domesticity. See topic 4.11. Marriages arranged by one's parent became less common, and some women elected to have fewer children. Nevertheless, legal restrictions on women remained. For example, they could not vote. Economic and social mobility. Real wages improved for most urban workers in the early 1800s. But the gap between the very wealthy and the very poor increased. Social mobility, moving upward in income level and social status, did occur from one generation to the next. And economic opportunities in the United States were greater than in Europe. Extreme examples of poor, hardworking people becoming millionaires, however, were rare. Population growth and change. Population growth provided both the laborers and the consumers required for industrial development. Between 1800 and 1825, the U.S. population doubled. In the following 25 years, it doubled again. A high birth rate accounted for most of this growth, but it was strongly supplemented after 1830 by immigrants arriving from Europe, particularly from Great Britain and Germany. The non-white population, African Americans and American Indians, also grew in total number. However, as a percentage of the total population, non-whites declined from almost 20% in 1790 to 15% in the 1850s. The enslaved population increased steadily despite the ban on the importation of enslaved Africans after 1808. In no other country in the Americas did the enslaved population generally increase after the slave trade ended. By the 1830s, almost one-third of the population lived west of the Alleghenies. At the same time, both old and new urban areas were growing rapidly. Immigration. In 1820, about 8,000 immigrants arrived from Europe, but beginning in 1832, there was a sudden increase. After 1832, the number of new arrivals never fell below 50,000 a year, and in 1 year, 1854, climbed as high as 428,000. From the 1830s through the 1850s, nearly 4 million people from Northern Europe crossed the Atlantic to seek a new life in the United States. The surge in immigration between 1830 and 1860 was chiefly the result of the following. 1. Development of the inexpensive and relatively rapid ocean transportation. 2. Famines and revolutions in Europe that drove people from their homelands. And 3. The growing reputation of the United States as a country offering economic opportunities and political freedom. Arriving by ship in the northern seacoast cities of Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, many immigrants remained where they landed, while others traveled on farms and cities of the Old Northwest. Few journeyed to the South, where the plantation economy and slavery limited the opportunities for free labor. The immigrants strengthened the U.S. economy by providing both a steady stream of inexpensive labor and an increased demand for mass-produced consumer goods. Urban life. The North urban population grew from approximately 5% of the population in 1800 to 15% by 1850. As a result of such rapid growth in cities from Boston to Baltimore, slums also expanded. Crowded housing, poor sanitation, infectious diseases, and high rates of crime soon became characteristics of large working-class neighborhoods. Nevertheless, the new opportunities in cities offered by the Industrial Revolution continue to attract people from farming communities, including both native-born Americans and immigrants from Europe. New cities. At key transportation points, small towns grew into thriving cities after 1820. Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago on the Great Lakes, Cincinnati on the Ohio River, and St. Louis on the Mississippi River. The cities served as transfer points, processing farm products for shipment to the east and distributing manufactured goods from the east to their region. Organized labor. As manufacturing became increasingly important in the economy, goods became less expensive. For those who could afford them, the standard of living improved. The shift in economy also created a small class of people, including some factory owners and bankers, who were very wealthy, and a growing middle class of people. Industrial development meant that a large number of people who had once earned their living as independent farmers and artisans became dependent on wages earned in a factory. With the common problems of low pay, long hours, and unsafe working conditions, urban workers in different cities organized both unions and local political parties to protect their interests. The first U.S. Labor Party, founded in Philadelphia in 1828, succeeded in electing a few members of the city council. For a brief period in the 1830s, an increasing number of urban workers joined unions and participated in strikes. Organized labor achieved one notable victory in 1842 when the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled the Commonwealth versus Hunt that peaceful unions had the right to negotiate labor contracts with employers. During the 1840s, some state legislators in the North passed laws establishing a 10-hour workday for industrial workers. Improvements for workers, however, continued to be limited by 1. Periodic depressions. 2. Employers and courts that were hostile to unions. And 3. An abundant supply of low-wage immigrant labor. Key terms by theme. Urban growth, urban life, new cities, industry and problems, industrial revolution, unions, Commonwealth versus Hunt, 10-hour workday.